Everybody, thanks for coming. Welcome to Amherst Live, the live magazine show about what it means to live here in a small northeastern town and what we can learn from our neighbors about how to live better. I'm Oliver Broudy, I'm your host. Dan Hales and the Frost Heaves, our house band tonight. We've got a big show for you tonight. We've got interviews with fascinating people, we've got talks, we've got poetry, we've got music. But I want to start it off saying something about the town, just to kind of get us all in the same room. And sadly for us all, there's really only one issue, central issue, and it's the retreat. We have to say something about the retreat. And I was trying to figure out how to do this without, getting killed on stage. But I think that there is a way to do it, because I think ultimately this issue has less to do with a specific development. Well, it's got a lot to do with us, ultimately. And so I went down to, recently, I think it was November, a planning meeting at Town Hall just to pick up a vibe, see what was going on. And the developer's representative was there, and he was coming in to ask for some exceptions on this plan. For those of you, the one person in the audience and whoever's watching from afar who doesn't know what the retreat is, it's a student housing development that's been the subject of some controversy. Basically, we need student housing, but not everyone wants this development for a variety of reasons. So I was going just to check out this meeting, and I could barely get in the room because there are people flowing out of the meeting. I'm sure many of you were there. And in the middle of it, somewhere hidden was this developer, or their representative, and you could sort of feel the antipathy, like magnetic lines being directed down on this guy's head. And but the tone of the room was very strange, because even though he was surrounded by all this antipathy, he was cool as a cucumber. He knew his thing. He spoke in this sort of southern drawl. It was very smooth. And the fact is that I think that everyone in the room knew that there was only a limited amount that could be done about the development at this point. So there was this mix of feelings in the room, this anger, but also this restraint, because, being from the Northeast, we had this profound sense of decorum and propriety. And so you could feel this kind of inner tension that people were having. And so I was sitting there, and I immediately flashed back to something else that had happened to me shortly after I moved to town. We bought this house, and one of the first things that we did was just slaughtered all the trees in the backyard, really. And we moved up from New York, and the idea of doing that was anathema to us, because in New York, it's just taboo, the trees are so precious. But I think that in a way, we sort of kind of overcompensated. To get over the hump, we just took them all out. There was one that was left, and it was this wide, and, at the base, like a 4-foot diameter trunk. And when it came down, the houses, and the surrounding houses, you could see them almost leap off their foundations a little bit. And it was shortly after that I saw this figure emerge from the woods. And he was shouting at me, and I knew immediately that I had done wrong. I could see in an instant, like, oh boy, I screwed up. I should have gone to my neighbors and say, is it okay if I slaughter all these trees and, eliminate wildlife and, cause havoc in your proximity? Is that cool? But I didn't do that. I don't know why. I don't want to think about that too hard. But so this guy was coming out, and so I saw that I was wrong, and I said, come up to my house and let's talk about this, because I could see that I was wrong, and I couldn't put the trees back up, but I could tell him that I was sorry. I just moved in, you don't want to make enemies and so on. But the guy kind of stayed in the shadows, just sort of Sasquatch-like, kind of hiding in the conifers, and then he turned and went back to his house, but that's when I knew that I had him, because I told myself I was going to go after him. So I went after this guy, and I didn't see where he went, and go knocking on doors, and eventually find out where he lives, and his wife opens the door, and this is how I knew I had him, was because he wasn't at the door. He was hiding from me. He was hiding from my apology. So then I thought, now I've really got this guy. I'm gonna apologize to him, and there's no way that he's gonna escape it. And he had to. He had to come out and face me. Eventually, he came out. And I can still remember this sick little smile he had when he came out. And that's when I started feeling kind of bad. Like, why are you being so cruel to this guy? So I was walking back to my house wondering this, why are you forcing your apology on him? This isn't really about you being sorry, it's about you dominating your neighbor. And I realized that really the reason that I was behaving in this way is because there was something in that guy that I see myself in that guy. And it's that same kind of conflict of that sense of propriety and that sense of decorum, but also this kind of a strong moral sense and kind of coming together and clashing in this way. Like he knew that what I was doing was just not cool, but at the same time he couldn't quite bring himself to come up onto my lawn to give me the smack that I so deeply deserved. And it was that same kind of trapped feeling, that kind of Nash trapped feeling that I felt in that room at that planning meeting. That feeling of almost like emotional suffocation or something. And it's almost like it's like propriety cuts both ways. You have a keen sense of what's cool to do and what isn't. Like you feel that the development is definitely not a good thing to do if that is your position. But at the same time, your same sense of propriety keeps you from leaping over several rows of people and strangling the developer's representative. But I think that when you get into these situations where you have these trapped emotions, things can get kind of dangerous, because someone's gonna shout something, someone's gonna get pissed enough where they're gonna push over the line and do something. And I think that might very well have happened, except for one weird little incident in that meeting. This is how low we were. We couldn't really, the only objections that we could make were these small little objections like, someone raised a question, is there any guarantee that you can offer that you won't cut down trees that are larger than 15 inches in diameter? Maybe that's why I thought of the story about the neighbor, the tree cutting thing. And it was just like a pro forma kind of a question. But the chair of the council, whoever was kind of overseeing this thing, kind of duly took the question and passed it on to whoever was best fit to answer it and said, Ms. Brestrup, I think was her name, Ms. Brestrup, could you please speak to the trees? So there was that. There was exactly that kind of a pause, and this weird little laugh went around the room. But it was a nice moment because, like in that moment, it seemed like we were kind of all together, and that guy who was in the midst of us, he was alone, and he was as confused as we had felt before. Like, what are all these strange Northeasterners kind of laughing at? And of course, we were laughing at the surreality and weirdness of that image. Like one of our town administrators going to have like a private conference with a conifer or something out in the. But in that moment, we were able to kind of step back from ourselves, and that laughter kind of released us. And I guess the reason that I mention that is because, being from the Northeast, I think that we do have this tendency to get boxed in a little bit. This is part of what the show is about, is trying to figure out ways that we can kind of step outside of that box and take a step back and get a closer look at ourselves, just so we don't screw up, that's all. I mean, not that it's psychologically healthy or anything, God forbid, but because, maybe we can make better decisions for ourselves as a town, this kind of thing. So that's all I want to say at the start. We're going to jump right into the show now. We've got an interview with Casey Beebe from the Hitchcock Center coming up. And I guess the tie-in here is, if anything is going to take you out of yourself and kind of clear your head, it's certainly nature. So please join me in welcoming Casey Beebe.